and then we'll go. So welcome everyone to a special episode of Sight Club here with Tom, Sidney, Bushnell, aka Numbers, and with Miki Klann from Our Great Awakening. And we have the wonderful, majestic Mr. Juan Savin here with us today. So it's October 14th. Some things coming in the future. So Juan, how are you? We'll hand the time over to you.
Yeah, I'm doing great. I hear a little bit of an echo. I don't think it's at my end, and I heard a little bit of a sketchiness, just so you know, in case you're not hearing it at your end. But yes, doing great, and glad to see you're intact where you're at.
Yeah, we are. We've had quite a busy few days on the road. Myself and Miki were at the Iowa Trump rally on Saturday at the Scott McKay. At the tour on the Friday. We got to see Sound of Freedom just a couple of days ago in LA, and it's been an awesome few days. We feel a little bit like you, Juan, jet setting around all the time, just for a moment.
Yeah. You know? Well, and what did you think of the movie? Of course, we're getting ready to make an announcement about the release date on that, but that's not public yet. We haven't. Yeah. We're close, but what did you think of the movie?
Thought it was incredible. I mean, I've obviously known about it for a number of months, like a lot of people have now, but I hadn't had a chance to watch it. And just as soon as you go in, because you know, you have a few ideas of what's about to, to be shared, and just it, really grabs you, a tearjerker. I mean, there's a small, it's not ruining it, but there's a part where there's a young boy at the border, and it just made me start to cry, and many
the only thing
moments
I'd
like
add
that through
here,
the film. Yeah.
The only thing I'd add here is this. By the way, for anybody that thinks you can go online and buy the movie or see the whole movie, it is not available. The people saying you can rent the movie or buy the movie to watch it, that is a scam being run out of Indonesia and the Philippines, and we've tried to stop it everywhere we can. The scammers, it's just electronic. They can put stuff like that in anywhere they want and get money for it and bait people into it. We attack it anywhere we find it. The movie is not available to be bought or rented anywhere. The only thing you can see publicly is the trailer. Because of who you are with, there's only two of us that have actual copies that we can show, and we are extremely selective in those moments. So the fact that you saw it was a tremendous courtesy, so that you could talk about it firsthand when we get closer to releasing it. But it's not something where just anybody's going to see the movie. And so I just want to clarify that, so nobody gets scammed out in your audience and gives away credit card information or something like that. Please don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Juan. What did you think, Miki?
I mean, it was so moving. I was moved to tears on many occasions. I have to say, I felt like it was the perfect bridge, the perfect link between, I guess maybe I would say it was G-rated for what maybe actually happens to some of these children, but it was the perfect blend between something that the world can take now and something that will cause them to create change in the future. Does that make sense? Like, it was like, I guess my point is that a lot of people have a hard time accepting that this is going on behind the scenes, but to know that there are heroes out there like Tim Ballard fighting this fight, and to know that there's something we can all do about this, I think is so essential. And I feel like I said, that movie just bridged the perfect gap between those that are maybe on the fence thinking if it's real or not real, and those that know for a fact this is real and we want to do something about it. It's the perfect link in I think the collective right now.
Well, in time, as this comes out, there's a lot of revelations that are coming from McAfee's stuff, from the Maxwell, the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Other sources are going to be releasing stuff over the next many months. So prior to Sound of Freedom's release date, I think that the world gets more sensitized to what's going on and then ready to want to understand this subject matter better. Remember, today, at this moment in history, a lot of people in our audiences think of, a fairly advanced modern world. Yet, at this moment in history, there are more human slaves than ever in history combined up until just a few years ago. So we have more slaves on planet Earth than ever existed. Even if you take them all and put them to roll them together, well, we have a larger population. But that percentage of the population that are in human slavery is astonishing. And most of those are children. Yeah. Your audience, the vast majority of them, with even horrible things that have happened to kids, experiences, predators, etc. They didn't actually end up in some type of sex slavery, rape slavery. They're, even in a worst case scenario, they can't fully comprehend what that might be like. Yeah. And yet a large number of people on planet Earth, that's their moment to moment, day to day existence. It's incomprehensible. I'm dealing with some issues down here in Texas. So we're working on something related to the border, and not just the Mexico border, but further south, other borders. And but over and over and over again, the things that are happening with these children, people trying to get them up here and get them into America, etc. It's just almost incomprehensible. Decent people don't talk about these things because it's just too gruesome. And we have to have this conversation as humanity. It's not an American conversation. It's not just a European conversation or a South American conversation. It's the whole world. It's not even a Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, anything else conversation. If you're a human, you cannot allow this to take place on your planet. We have to stop it. And so these types of movies that help you to get an understanding of how it happens, who it happens to, what happens. This movie goes as far as you probably can really go and still be released in a general movie release type of an environment. And that's really important because we're not here trying to do pornography. We're not trying to do smut. We're not doing something that is dancing on the horrors. I think the movie is very, very, very tastefully done, presents an impossibly difficult subject in a manner that you can absorb it, think about it, understand it, and then come to some conclusion about that you can, how we have to mentally begin to rethink this. I think it's amazing. The people that wrote and produced the movie did a fantastic job. The final edit was done by Mel Gibson. He had to take out about 15 minutes to make it work and be short enough to actually fit in there. I think he did a stunning job. I told him, I think it's just, I can't even, just tiny intricacies in the editing. It's amazing, and having seen what Jennifer Mack did on The Called on my movie last year, I know all those little things that make it tight and make it work. Anybody that complains about them too long-winded, well, she cut it down to a very precise thing. Mel Gibson did the same thing. That kind of editor's eye is just, you can't beat it. And so anyway, that I hope your audience will talk about it again. Now that you've seen it, you're knowledgeable. We get ready for the release date. You'll be able to help people to encourage them, go see the movie. I think everybody needs to see this movie.
Well, and I walked away with hope, actually. I felt it was hopeful. I walked away with being inspired, wanting to make a difference, wanting to get involved. And I think that's what I kind of mean by it's not necessarily meant to traumatize us. It's meant to get us engaged and involved and to open a new door into the solution. Does that make sense?
Well, I think that's the whole point. Again, it's I had somebody that's close to this project, a relative said, "Oh, it's a rape movie. I don't want anything to do with it."
Right.
And I'm like, that just grates me so bad. It's anything but, they said a child rape movie. Mm-hmm. So nobody should go see it. It just makes me furious because that is not at all what the movie is. The movie, what actually happened in the real story is slightly different than what happened in the movie. You actually have to think of it as a couple different stories blended and compressed into one. And there's certainly other stories. In fact, the follow-on movie, there's another movie in the mill after this comes out to be filmed. And the storyline on that's even better than this one. It's hard to do a follow-up that's better than the first one. Most of the time, they're just trying to get momentum from the first and make a few extra bucks. The second one, I think, is even the better movie than this one, and I'm anxious to get it made. But we have lots of stories. There's even a television series potentially that may come from this project. The main thing is we need to increase the opportunities to have the conversation, to discuss it, because if it's a bit more out in the open, then maybe some of the answers that are needed come. I mean, how else? We cannot turn our heads. How did we get more human slaves today, mostly children, in this modern era? How does that happen?
Yeah.
It's disturbing. And then how do we, one of the lines in the movie that is really, I think it's a line that will be repeated for decades and decades to come. And I think it's the most compelling line in the whole movie, potentially. And that is, God's children are not for sale. I think that's what people have to be left with. And we cannot be party to it, and we cannot allow it around us. We cannot allow it hidden and be near to us anywhere on this planet. It's hell's own tool to destroy people, both the people that are on the receiving end of this and those that are the purveyors of it, are in the grip of some hellish satanic thing. We have to stop it. It falls to our generation. We're the ones. We don't have any time to diddle. We need to be about the business that God's put before us. Stop the human trafficking, stop the human slavery, stop the child rape.
Exactly. Listen, Juan, I have someone who'd like to join us. Is it okay if we include Liz Bliss today? She works directly with Charlie Ward. I think you've met her before.
Sure.
Is that okay? Should I let her in? Okay.
Sure.
She'll be in just a minute. Keep talking. I just didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, no, what do you think? You're over here in America, you're traveling around. Any thoughts or impressions on what you've seen here in the country that sticks out to you versus England?
Yeah, that's a good question, Juan. Thank you. And hey Liz, when you join us. Bryce may join us as well, but I'm not sure yet, so she may join at some point. Yeah, so we had, well, some of the things that have stood out. Also, just before I go into that, Juan, I wanted to make a mention. So the great actor and star of the film, Jim Caviezel, I just wanted to throw a little bit of simple gematria in. So if you do, James Patrick Caviezel comes to 209, which also comes to Empire State Building, interesting enough. But 209 plus Sound of Freedom is 160. And that comes to 369. So it's got the Tesla numbers 369, and there's others that have the numbers 369. But I just wanted to put that out to the audience. So there is a divine power behind all of this with the film. So it doesn't seem to be any coincidence that James Patrick Caviezel, the star of the film, 209 plus Sound of Freedom 160 comes to 369, which is the Tesla numbers. And maybe you can elaborate upon that part of the way through the conversation with Tesla.
Well, 369, Tesla, he believed that those were the numbers that were the basis for all physical matter, as well as for extrapolating energy from the movement of or use of physical matter. So you see all through the other physics, 369. The other physics is based on rotation, rotation, rotation. Everything is wheels within wheels within wheels. And so the 369 is also an extrapolation of that. And he used it in his 60 cycles a second being added in on the AC. You know, there's so many places. I mean, I have to think about it for a minute or two about everywhere that might apply for people, but he based his inventions in large measure on extrapolations of math based on the 369 interrelationship progression, rotation within rotation within rotation.
Thanks, Juan. Also, as well with that is if you just spell out the numbers 3, 6, and 9, if you include the word "and," which is 19, which you talk a lot about. So 3 is 56, which is light. 52 is the word 6, which is clan, which is earth, which is ship, and 9 is 42, which is new, which is Miki, which is lady. It's a number of things. But if you add the word "and," 19, 3, 6, and 9, it comes to 169, which is the Great Awakening. Happens to be one of my names, Thomas Bushnell, one way to say it, so I always notice those. But also, probably maybe even more importantly, is it comes to Trump Tower. And we had the privilege, like I mentioned at the beginning, to go to the Iowa rally with President Trump on Saturday. Something that he said a number of things. There was a lot of comms. Iowa comes to 48, which is Spiker, it's Tom, it's a few things. But he said, he mentioned, and he repeated it twice, so it caught my attention. And he said Fifth Avenue. And Fifth Avenue is obviously where Trump Tower is. And I thought I'd wear some semaphore colors today, because you've got black is 29, which is Diana. Purple is 88, Trump. Add those together, 117, but that's also Rushmore, and it's also Fifth Avenue. And he made a point of repeating it twice. So I thought that was interesting. But it is the location of Trump Tower, which is 169, which is the Great Awakening, which is also 3, 6, and 9, which ties it back to the film that we're talking about.
Well, let me add one thing that you may not be aware of, that New Yorkers would be aware of. Fifth Avenue is where a lot of the advertising firms focused. And so if you were Fifth Avenue, then you were big in the advertising world. You made things bigger than life on Fifth Avenue. And so if you're trying to get a message out, you would do it in a Fifth Avenue way, on Fifth Avenue. If you wanted to own a message, you would own it on Fifth Avenue. So just food for thought.
Can I
And
add
is that connected to Madison Avenue as well? Do they intersect at all at any point? The advertising agency?
Yep.
Okay. Nice. Thanks, Juan.
Yep.
Can I ask a question about the 369? So again, I'm just kind of pulling research from other influencers out there. So Charlie Freak at one point said that Trump essentially sent out 13 units on 13 no-fail missions on December 24th, 2016, to take out 13 royal families. Now that was a 369 date. So December is a 12. So that comes a 3, 24 is a 6, and a 9 is 2016. So I'm just curious, like, it also apparently that date, this is coming from Negative, he said that that date is the 103rd anniversary of when they started the Federal Reserve. So that's kind of a really big deal. We're taking our 13 back, but so the 369 totals 18, as does the 666. So can you just elaborate on the difference between 369 versus 666 and maybe how they kept us in a system of control?
Well, that's a big question. Let me just say this first off. While I note the and I've said this other times with you guys, but while I note the numbers as a hidden language that are used by various families and have been for a very long time, it's like reading other people's mail sometimes. I had a message that was out there the other day on something, and people had a certain understanding. It says, whoa, wait. I know the guys involved. You're assuming they were talking about this, but that's not what they were talking about. I know, because I know what the conversation was. They're talking on this other thing over here. So context means something. And then sometimes culturally, one thing is said a certain way in one area of the world, but in another area of the world, it's interpreted differently. So, for example, I had a friend who was an exchange student in Australia, and he goes out in the field, I'm going to be rooting for you on the team and everything else. All the cheerleaders blush. All the guys are like looking the other direction. Why? Because when you say that in Australia, it has huge sexual innuendo. Mm-hmm. And, but you say it in other parts of the world and nobody thinks twice about it. So, context and location and the people involved. So, plus you can add a word, just like saying, well, it's common to add and it has a certain letter value. But if you're a wizard, if you're a magician, a Merlin, well, I have these letters and here's the various values of these letters. So maybe I would add it, or I would add the. Mm-hmm. And I'll get a slightly different one. It'll end up being what I want it to be, and I can make anything say anything. So I'm fairly careful, especially as you add words into sentences and stuff like that, because I can begin to manufacture, and that's part of the wizardry. They do have specific messages they're trying to give. They do communicate very specifically, and they want it to look like it's happenstance, that it just so happens to be this. If they're communicating a private message between each other, they'll always use maybe a certain phrase, and the other side knows that's exactly what it is if you have the key code. Right. That's slightly different than a more intrinsic value of, say, a specific word or a specific number, which, for example, 19, there's 3 primary ways to look at 19. And it still has meaning, a very similar meaning each time. So 19.47 is extremely specific. It's usually used, for example, certain things had to happen in 1947 related to the magic, and did. You had Roswell, you had creation of the CIA and the Air Force. You have Israel moves into the country, the nation. 47 was a huge year. 47 is also code for Washington, D.C., one of the 3 international cities. So you have 19.47 being this monstrously huge number, but they round it up to 19.5. So they use 19.5 in code all the time. For example, Obama being sworn in at 7:30 p.m. local time in Washington, D.C. in that second ceremony because he didn't say the oath right or something, allegedly. And then the room facing the monolith with the map room being the room, and then the designer of Washington, D.C. on the picture in the background. Right. There was all sorts of hidden messages there, but it was done at 19.5 military time, 1930 hours, which is another way of saying 19.5, 19 and a half. It's 19.47, the power number, but if you're in the club, you know that's code for us. And then 19, you can round 19.47 down, and it's 19. So in an abbreviated conversation, and you're trying to put something out broad to the world, and it's us. You send a message to all your friends and buddies. Whatever happens, whatever you're seeing here, this is us. This is our team. This is you and me, okay? It's a little backslap. We got this between buddies. So they brand things with their number. They know, yep, I'm on board. This is us. So you have what? COVID-19. Why not 18? Why not 27? Why not 9? Because it's a power number. So they brand it. The stimulus bill related to the COVID-19. How much is it? 1.9 trillion. Give me a fucking break. Okay. You see this over and over and over. I mean, I could just go on ad nauseum on the same stuff. So when I hear numbers, I'm always real careful. You can read in interpretations that aren't necessarily precisely what was intended, or even, divinely ordained in the matrix. They're just somebody's kind of playing with it a little bit in a wizardly sense to, get the intonation that yes, it's incredible. And so I'm pretty careful. I'm not blind to it, and I'm not, I'll take it informationally, but I don't necessarily construct my life around it or make decisions based on it. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes. Yeah. So is that why you have 19.5, page 19.5, and the kid by the side of the road?
Absolutely. And because I'm trying to make a point.
Yeah. You're trying to round up, right? Because 47 comes to John. So they were rounding down and you're rounding up. So you're making a point that you see their terminology, their manipulation.
Yeah, there's a lot of similar things. I mean, you can go into all sorts of depths. I have 369 in much of the things around me that I consider matrix things. I would never have guessed them. I would have never seen it coming. And I've had it pointed out a number of times and in multiple ways. I'm like, wow, even 107, it's stunning to me, in multiple ways. And I go, oh my gosh, really? And I'll find it all the time. And I take it as kind of a God com. I don't make changes based on it, but it is an interesting thing in the matrix. There's a natural matrix that you see in multiple areas, not just the numbers, but primarily understandable in the numbers. And that you just have to say that is like a hand of God thing. There's other stuff though, where people come in and they want to, double down. They want to own it a certain way. And so they go to great, efforts to make things, manipulate them into working. So for example, a lot of people's names in certain down side of the royal families, you got 13 primary bloodline families. Mm-hmm. And then you have this huge number. It'd be like the 12 sons of Jacob in Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. well, you say, okay, so what's the primary name? Somebody asked me that the other day. I says, well, wait a second. I mean, actually, the primary names, you could go look at these people. You have to look up and see where their bloodline is. They're in this family, and they've also got some intermarriage over here. But what's the commanding one in that relationship? So there's all sorts of intricacies that you can get lost in the maze. And I don't waste my time with it. I just know that there is relationship into those families in a lot of these places. But a lot of times what they'll do is they will change just one letter or add a letter or two to a name. So we were just talking about a particular person who is very key, and he's a relative. Yes, and they know exactly when the name was changed in the 1700s. And now all of a sudden that name went from being a value of, I think, 603 to being 666. Mm-hmm. I can tell you multiple names where some ancestor changed a vowel or a consonant, and then all of a sudden the name now, you wonder, well, there's names that are real close. Why do they have one extra letter in this version and one less in that, or something like that? Because they were trying to hone the name, because they were high level Masons. They were high level in one of the cults. And even that letter change identifies if they're part of this family of the bloodlines or that family of the bloodlines, because it's a number relationship to that bloodline. And so you actually have to look past the name to the mathematical value, and then 636 is this bloodline, a 666 is this bloodline. Different of the bloodlines have different primary numbers, and they've changed the name slightly, because the names that people had 500 years ago are quite different from the names they have today in these various families, just so you know.
Hi, Juan. This is Liz Bliss. And first I want to just tell you.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Miki.
Hi.
I just want to tell you, Juan, that you are so instrumental in helping us be anchored to really understanding what's going on without, of course, divulging anything that's extremely important. But I wanted to say this about what you had just said regarding names and numbers. I mean, God actually changed the name of Abram to Abraham, adding the H in the middle, meaning the breath of God, and also reflected his destiny, because the Hebrew language, as you know, has an alphanumeric meaning assigned to each of the letters. Therefore, as far as the numeric aspect is concerned, back in those days, it had extreme significance. And not that it doesn't to a certain degree now, but I think you made such an excellent point in saying that in this matrix, there is so many streams of wisdom and knowledge and revelation that is being revealed right now, that some of us really just have to stay focused in exactly what our particular thing is, because the rest of it can be confusing. And one number that I'm very
let me just say this real quick.
Okay, sure.
And Jacob, Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. And so people say they're children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Each name has a meaning. Isaac was the child of faith. Abraham was the father of the faithful. But Jacob, he was this conniver,
Right.
And he was always trying to work a deal, and even to work his brother out of the inheritance, Esau. Mm-hmm. And God touched him, hit him in the hip, and displaced it a bit. And that was when he was wrestling with the angel to get a blessing. And so when the angel blessed him, he hit him in the hip. He kind of got a little bit sideways there. But then again, there's some innuendo that it was also because he then became the father of the 12 tribes. He had 12 sons. And so at that time, he blessed him, and gave him a new name. And the new name was Israel. So Jacob became Israel, who was the father of the nations, the 12 tribes. So, God himself changed the name, changed the numeric value, just like Abram, his grandfather. So there is an importance from a divine side. God, all these numbers, 17 is the number of victories, the number of the flip, the reversal, the boomerang, as Roseanne likes to say it, 17Q in the English language. 17 is also the number of Osiris. It's the death date and rebirth date in the legend of Osiris. And so there's a good side and an evil side in the way numbers are captured, used, or promoted. And so it can have a good side, it can have a negative side. Just seeing a number by itself doesn't mean that it's positive or negative. It's like energy. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil.
Right. And the particle accelerator in Geneva, CERN, as we know, has the ability to change the energetic state of the 3, 6, and 9, which is what Tesla actually said. He said, if you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, 9, you would have a key to the universe. And having that key to the universe is one of the things they've been attempting to do, as you know, at CERN. My question to you, sir, is do the white hats have full control over that particle accelerator, considering the kind of implications that are possible?
Well, let me come at it at a slightly different angle. Just because people have really big toys that do really amazing things doesn't mean that they fully grasp what they can or cannot do. They wanted to build something 10 times as big as the CERN accelerator down here in Texas, and it got shut down. But part of the reason behind the scenes that it got shut down is because trying to split apart atoms, collide them, etc., the way they do, and to see these effects is not actually as effective as another method. And so we understand that there's other methodologies also available. And while CERN's, pretty disconcerting in many ways, it's just like the HARP projects. You have a lot of incredible power there, but with just slight changes and understanding the other physics, things that can be pretty daunting. It doesn't matter how flashy and big and beautiful they are, they can suddenly become a boondoggle with just a deft, slight change in understanding, and in this case, going to the other physics. So I'm not that concerned with it. I'm actually more concerned, for example, with CERN, with the mentality of the people involved in that project. They want to open gateways, pathways for, they have their dancing with the goats stuff. They did same thing with the tunnel ceremonies in that huge tunnel complex there in Northern Europe. There's some pretty bizarre people and mentalities involved in those projects. And their ceremony tells us who they are and what they believe. And it's a bit disconcerting, but I don't think they're as powerful by a fraction of half as they think they are. And God himself, for all that they think they're going to do certain things, will snuff it and put it out in an instant. They will not get their opportunity to destroy mankind or even control mankind. Even if they get it for a moment, an hour, a day, it won't stand. God won't allow it.
Wow.
And
Juan, can we talk about the financials tomorrow? Well, two things. I'd like to ask you about the financials tomorrow, the third quarter, and also about Roswell. You mentioned that, and whether Roswell has a divine component, or if it's more of the wizardry in the world of, you know, the engineered versus the natural. But if we could talk about the financials tomorrow, the third quarter, October 15th.
Well, I think, let me just say this. You know, you have reporting that has to happen in the markets. And it's not going to be very favorable. And I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to understand that. You know, will it mean that the stock market collapses tomorrow? No, I'm not saying that at all. I think that it's very weak, and that, you know, you don't have to be a Nostradamus to know that the financials have both been cooked to make them look better than they really are. The underlying numbers are known to everybody to a great extent, and they're gruesome. And we're headed towards some kind of a collision on whether or not people are going to comply with this medical thing that everybody wants forced on us. So with that in mind, it's another nail in the coffin, forcing us to reset, most likely to a lower number, potentially a much lower number. It may take a week or two. I don't think it's months. It may take a week or two for this to soak in, and then the pressure. See, there's all sorts of tools available behind the scenes to support the market, and it's all about this perception of stability. So in order to keep people from all running to the doors to exit because there's somebody yelled fire, you can do all sorts of things to calm the crowd, make it look okay, get the publications to say stuff, all the talking heads to say stuff, and then support it behind the scenes with derivatives and various funds that they have available to them to kind of keep things the right way. That can last a long time, but it's already been being employed for a long time. And there's a certain moment where everybody in the community, everybody along the parade route, all the adults with the brain, anybody that wanted to keep their neck, is in total agreement. The King's clothes are absolutely amazing. The King's clothes are so beautiful. Look at the embroidery, the stitching, the precision, the color, the magnificence. It's stunning how beautiful the King's clothes are. And all you need is one kid who didn't get the memo, doesn't have anybody to control him. And he says, "Hey, look, the King has no clothes on. What's that all about?"
Right.
Okay. The markets are thin as can be. The dramas behind the scenes with the ports. Do you know that in Long Beach, they sent employees home the other day? They didn't have any ships to unload. All you got to do is stand on the shoreline and look at all the ships up the coast sitting there waiting to deliver cargo. And Long Beach sends all their longshore workers. "We don't have anything to unload today. There's no ships." Well, we have a backlog. We don't have any trucks. We don't have any this. There's something is FUBAR. Okay. And for example, here today, there's publication, John Deere tractors. I think it was 10,000 employees aren't going to get, aren't going to comply. You got Chicago with 1,000 police officers, I think, that said they weren't going to get it, and similar number of firefighters. You got Defiance. You ought to run that number. Defiance rearing its head up all across the country. No, and they're going to push the big red button and stop. I believe that's what we actually have to have for the country, is some level of defiance to save our lives and the lives of those around us, and to stop the insanity from going further. And I think that it is happening. And the place you'll see it reflected the quickest is in the markets, because the markets represent business and transactions and purchases and sales. If you're being blocked from doing that, if commerce is slowing down, if the velocity of money moving through the system is slowed down radically, the place that it shows up is in the markets. And you can fill a gap of a few percent with chicanery and maneuvering and with these various funds. But at some certain point, the wall of water, you only got so many fingers and toes to put in the dike. And then it's an overwhelming number. And I think we're at that point. And I think it actually is a healthy thing, because if we allow our system to be shut down on somebody else's schedule, it'll be the death of 1,000 razor slashes. Before you get to the death of 1,000 razor slashes, we might as well just go ahead and go to war. And war in this case is stop, fold your arms, and say, I'm not going any further, and I'm not going along with this. And I won't have it happen on my watch. It's not shoot somebody, and it's not take over a building. The business of America is business. You stop doing business, you stop everything, just freeze. If you don't need 50%, you only need to decide to stop a few percent. I think it'll be higher than that. And they just say, we're done, we're stopping, we're not going along with it. Get your act together. You're not doing what's in the best interest of the American people, and we're not cooperating. And we do it not just for ourselves. This is a global push to get us all to comply. It's sterilization, it's murder, it's genocide. And we're not going to put up with it. We're not going to be part of it. We're not going to allow it on our watch. We start here in America, and then we help the rest of the world to do the same. And the rest of the world, I will say, has been beating us in some areas. So, my hat's off to those locations that have stopped going along with the madness. And we're all going to do this together. This is a global push to depopulate the planet, and we're not going to cooperate.
Juan, really quick, wait, Liz, really quick. Before I pass it off to you, I'd love to hear what you say about that. But he asked us to look up defiance, which comes to 47, John 47, luck 47, time 47, Babylon, which is interesting, 47. And then there was one more here that was really good. And I thought Liz 47, exactly. So Liz, take it away.
So Juan, related to what you just said, I love you, Miki, you know that. I love Tom too. Here's the thing. Do you think then, historically speaking, because of the pattern that the cabal has had especially since 1929, when they caused the stock market crash and then called in everybody's gold a few years after that, that historically speaking, do you feel that this is the month where that tipping point could be reached, where the duct tape falls off, the wheels fall off, and that perhaps, hopefully, the president, our president that is, has a parallel plan in place to mitigate the absolute damage and chaos that could ensue from a very serious and long overdue correction of this market?
Let me try to answer that as completely as possible. How long, I want your listeners to just ask themselves how long they think this can last if people start to shut it down. How long can you go without the goods in those containers that are off the coast? Parts, spare parts. I was dealing with people in some oil stuff yesterday and the day before, and they've got enough spare parts to get by, but they're starting to run pretty thin. Stuff that breaks and needs to be replaced pretty regularly. And a lot of that stuff comes from offshore. And to get stuff here that can do it, you got to build, you can do it. We have the technology, but it hasn't been done yet. And there's a lot of little stuff, like the one guy said, well, we can build this particular group of things here. But then again, I need certain precise tools of a particular nature that we get out of Germany. And I need some particular motor systems that we've been getting out of China. I don't know that we know where they are here in the US. Might be able to get them out of a group out of Switzerland. But do they have enough, and can I get them here? And then how long does it take to reorient the supply chain? So you have supply chains that have been coming a certain way and it's been working, and then suddenly you stop getting it there. How do you redo those supply chains? And did somebody beat you? And then is there another priority? Yeah, they could supply you, but you're not critical like so-and-so is. So there's like this gridlock that's developing in the business sector, in the manufacturing sector. And it will take time to kind of get resituated. How good is that for stocks, for the value of stocks, where they have to make money? How much does it cost them to reorient? Yes, this particular company makes a particular product that they've been just grab a bunch of stuff off the shelf, put it together in this configuration in their particular design, and send it out. Now, if you take out just a couple of those parts from the supply chain and nobody's there to do it, well, they can do it themselves, but they have to build a manufacturing facility. It won't have to be huge, but they have to have even the right components in that manufacturing facility. And it will take a few months, and they've got to get the workers able to do it. It's not instant. So just like they said, I could be 2 quarters from beginning to be able to fulfill those orders if I can get the parts to make my own mini factory. And in the meantime, my big stuff is sitting. I'll have rows of them sitting out there that I have to pay for while they're sitting there as inventory, waiting for me to make my manufacturing plant for these other components so I can send the whole thing down the road. I might have a half a year's inventory sitting there and all the employees paid and everything else before I have something ready to go. That's a huge bite. I guarantee it's going to hurt their bottom line, and they're thinking about it. And what do? Do we pause and just not deliver anything until things figure themselves out? Okay, well, it still affects their bottom line. We got serious problems here. And so I don't know, I got a little bit diverted. It's a complex moment. People shouldn't be naive just how complex it is. And there are moments, that's where this businessman's having to make a decision. Is it safer and more intelligent to pause and get out of the way, or do I double down and expect industry to come back full steam and start working the problem to do manufacturing? I will tell you that they were inclined to pause. My inclination is to take advantage of the vacuum and get market share, start building that infrastructure to make those parts. Maybe it's a blended thing. They slow down more than they want to, and they ramp up in making their manufacturing. Neither of them's perfect, but they're not sitting still. I think pausing means somebody else steps in and gets in there before they do down the road, and they miss an opportunity. America's going to be coming back. It's going to come back like you can't believe. Don't count America out. But it's going to be wonky, and you don't want to be the guy that overreaches and gets your head chopped off because you got greedy or you went too far.
Juan, you one of the things you mentioned earlier was Roswell. I wanted to ask you more about that, and whether that was completely divine or a warlocky event, or a bit of both. And maybe if we could touch upon time travel. One of the things I have a question about with time travel is, as we move through this great awakening, are we as the public going to kind of experience more of that, or is that more of a behind the scenes thing that has been done to get us to this point in time? I'd just love to ask your opinions and thoughts about both Roswell and time travel, if you would, please.
Well, you're a little broken up, but I believe you're asking about Roswell. Roswell was 47. The reality is that the, really good world changing magicianry. It's got to be around for a long time. Tavistock was all about mind control and societal control. And so with certain themes, people want what they can't get. You have magicians and wizards. They're always concocting things. Here in America, we have the Rand Institute. And there's myths that have been pushed and created to push society in a certain direction. So I'll use one example. Roswell, the little gray men. Well, who had the little gray men first? That was Crowley, the Satanist. And he drew pictures of them. They came to him in his dreams. And that was Tavistock that he was working with. That was their well-orchestrated intention to begin the narrative to soften our minds towards the idea that we had celestial brothers, cousins coming here to help save us, and that we have to be ready to turn ourselves over to their assistance. It's like the Twilight Zone had a particular episode, and in the Twilight Zone episode, the alien shows up and he has a cookbook, this book to make the medicine to save humanity. And the guy's interpreting the words. He's figured out how to interpret language. And so he's got the meaning of this book. He's going to steal it from the alien because it's so incredible. And so he gets the book and does all the interpretation. It's to serve man. He's here as our brother to serve us. And then he realizes too late, it's not to serve man, to help man. It's a cookbook to cook man up for a meal. This whole alien theme has a different bent than most people realize, and it's part of a deception. Edward Teller talked about that there was going to be a great deception. Disclosed that his secretary talked about it and wrote about it after he passed away, that there was a plan for a great deception. In the Bible, it talks about there will be a great deception, so great that it will deceive even the elect, if it were possible. The elect being the spiritual leaders and people like that. You're from London. I'll just tell you, I've spoken of it previously. You need to have people look at it. Go read Kaldani, Kaldani, Kaldani's The Occult Numbers of Prince William. I think it's one of the greatest articles ever written, and I wish I'd written it. And he wrote only 6 articles. He's living as a recluse up there in northern England, but I think he's one of the great from a spiritual standpoint and understanding things, having stuff given to him by God himself. They're very inspired writings. That's my personal belief. And you have to understand there's an intent to deceive the world by Satan himself. Even the whole thing, with the reptilians among us, that the alien reptilians, reptilian is just code for the 13 bloodline families. They believe that they're descendants of Cain, and that Cain was fathered with Eve, the father being Lucifer, Satan, the devil, Samael. And if you think of the garden, if Lucifer entered into the garden, he was alien to human life, alien to Adam and Eve as a race. And the belief of these people is that they're not less than human, they're more than human, They're fully human because Eve is the mother of these tribes. And if Lucifer's the father, then they have all the humanness plus the reptilian bloodlines. Because why? Satan, Lucifer, the devil in the narrative was cursed and made to crawl upon the earth as a reptile. So he was reptilian. So when they talk about the reptilians, they're not talking aliens from outer space. They're talking our alien cousins right here and now. You don't have to look to Alpha Centauri. You don't have to look to Sirius. They believe that they're trying to build out the human race to return to Sirius, that they fell to earth. They were cast out of heaven. And just like at the Tower of Babel, they were building a tower to the heavens that God himself said if he did not confuse their languages, they would succeed, that nothing would be impossible to them. So when you talk about the numbers, what in the modern era that was being practiced for hundreds of years before we got to this modern era, what was the way that we wove back together our ability to communicate after it was divided at the Tower of Babel, when everybody spoke a different language and couldn't communicate their ideas? Now we have the computer, which, by the way, in a basic system, take A as 6, B as 12, C is 18, go all the way through the alphabet, and then add up computer. That word was chosen for a very specific reason. It was created by mathematicians hundreds of years ago for a very specific reason. The computer is the way that we now communicate, take different languages. It's the universal language translator on planet Earth. So when they use the language of numbers, it's very important to them. And what they're doing is trying to rebuild some aspect of this space program so they can return back to Sirius. And I'm actually very serious.
Wow.
That's why Elon Musk, what's he call his rockets? The Dragon rockets. What did they do? They went up and mated with Isis. Why the name Isis? Because that's the mother goddess, the mother of Osiris. And Isis, what happens if the dragon, Lucifer, Satan, the devil, the reptilian, mates with Isis and has children? And by the way, what's a dragon? A dragon is just a snake. The early dragons were just snakes. But when they have arms and legs, who gives the dragon, the snake, arms and legs? It's the combination by DNA with humanoids to give it arms and legs. It's the hybrid.
Wow.
Juan, the other part of my, thank you very much for that. The other part of my question was to do with time travel and looking glass. I'm just wondering if you can expound upon that a little bit more in terms of what's been going on to get us to this point, and what we may expect in the future in terms of looking glass, time travel, Tesla technology, etc. The other physics that you mentioned,
Yeah, it's misconstrued. Most of what's construed as time travel, there is a time compression capability, but it's not what most people believe. And then the other thing is that you can extrapolate events, and you can do that with some of the computing capabilities and probabilities, etc. I'm not certainly in the Bible. It talks about the ability to travel across time. That's what I've talked about with Daniel and the angel coming back from the future to tell him of the events going on in the future. But from a technical ability here in this time and age, I'm not buying into most of the stories. One of the things, of course, the Philadelphia experiment and aspects of that. But again, myths are created around a lot of this stuff. And a lot of that's for protection of the real story, and also to cause other governments to spend huge amounts of money trying to do what they think we've done because they believe it's possible. And so we sneak them into spending huge amounts of money to match us, which isn't actually what's occurred. We can make pretty good representations of things, but they're really just toys. I have, here I got little shoes here that they carry stuff in, the hats and stuff like that. A lot of fun little stuff, flags. They all carry something in them. But the reality is that they're just toys. They're not reality. I can make an illusion, and I can sell an illusion into a young child, somebody like that. They might actually attach a lot of significance to all these little things, but they're just toys. This idea that you have time travel that we're manipulating right now, in that sense, it's not true time travel. We're extrapolating information, doing computer concoctions, simulations of options, some of which is actually referred to in the technical papers as a type of time travel, but it's really just algorithms and concoctions. It's not literally people walking into the future or doing other stuff. It's just not true.
What's the you said to protect the real story? What's the real story that you were referring to when you said it needed to be protected?
Well, you have lots of times where you do things to protect a real story. Certainly Churchill talked about how precious the truth is in certain situations. So you concoct variations around it that are plausible, and you'll get people going down a rabbit trail if they find something. So, for example, the Clementine Project with Hughes, they said he was going out to building these huge ships to go out and pick up magnesium nodules that roll around on the ocean floor. And so it's going to use a big grappling hook to go down and grab these magnesium nodules, 2 and 3 and 4 miles down, pick them up to the surface, and then they can use them for mining. And it's cheaper to grab those and just go dig them out of a hillside, dig all the magnesium out of a hillside. So it was a mining ship. The reality is the most expensive project ever undertaken by man up until that time in the late 70s or late 60s, early 70s was this project to go out and pick up a Russian submarine north of Hawaii. I've talked about that several times. The story about going out and using it as a mining ship, even the fact most people don't know this, even in the project, don't know there was 2 ships, not one. And one was cover and one was the real one, to fake out anybody not knowing which one was which, and that there were 2. And so they went out to pick up a Russian submarine on the ocean floor and pull it up to the surface. All of China opening up, all of these events, even now related to China, hinged on the K-129 lifting of that submarine and the opening of China with Nixon and everything else. The world's entire history hinged on this event. Well, it was the most, it cost technologically and everything else, it was more expensive than a moon flight. It was like going to Mars in complexity. And it happened, almost 50 years ago now. And it was all protected with these amazing stories, bizarre stories, incredible stories that had nothing to do with what really happened. And even today, a lot of writers write stuff and they've bought into the lies around it, not knowing that certain aspects of it were just cover stories, never happened or didn't happen that way. It's what happens in these types of worlds. We have lots of cover stories about aliens and time travel and med beds and all sorts of things that can be true, could be true at some point, but they're not true right now. So, or they're they're not quite fully exactly understood. So I'm a little slow to go too many of these places. We want to make sure that what we're focused on, what we're doing today, is going to save our life as countries, as people. And so I come back to things like Sound of Freedom. Do I need to go into a time machine to see the effects that would happen to children over time if I don't act now? No, I can see right now that children's lives are on the line, and my moral dignity, my children's moral dignity is at risk if we do not act. How can you have a nice life, a nice meal, whatever, knowing the horrors that are happening to children all around the world, here in the United States, over in London, up in Canada, down in Mexico, all around us? And it continues to go on. And even though we make efforts, they're weak efforts, they're lame efforts, they're not really helping these kids very hard, or adults. So do we just ignore it? Well, it's not my problem. I mean, literally, I've had people say, well, it's not my problem. I don't know what to do about it. We can't do anything. That's the problem, because it happens just out of sight, just out of mind. I don't need a time machine. I don't need to be able to look through walls to know what's going on. We know enough to throw huge monkey wrenches in those operations. We need to do it and compel our politicians to take care of that. I don't need to be distracted by whether or not the aliens from Sirius are here or not. I know who they are. They're the bloodline families. They're trying to do a ruse. It's magic. It's the art of distraction. That's what Tavistock and Rand Institute worked on. MK Ultra. How do we control the mind of a whole society, whole nations, so that they will do our will and ignore what the magician is doing behind the curtain, so they can lead us into some horrible end, take us to the slaughterhouse? We need to focus on the stuff that we know that's valid. Child slavery, child rape on a mass scale is real. There's more of it today than ever in human history. We need to double down against that and invoke the divine assistance and blessing from God, not some curse because we looked the other way at a critical moment, and understand that people want us to look at all the wrong things. The magician makes a flash flourish and your eyes go to that, and you don't see that his other hand is doing some manipulation to get ready for the next trick. Mm-hmm. Some of these things, just like Roswell, 1947 is a key to understanding this was part of the magician's trick on the numbers. They had to do it at exactly that moment. Don't be caught by surprise. Let's go get them.
I'm going to ask the question because I know all of our viewers are probably thinking this. Many truthers are on the fence about Elon Musk. Are you saying he is not a white hat?
I'm not terribly excited about most of the technology. The wealth that's come there is because of political changes to favor his type of a project. We closed down our own space program as a political decision and pushed all of that into private industry. Well, who got to be blessed? It's no different, as far as I'm concerned, than Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg didn't invent Facebook. It was invented over at DARPA. He was blessed with it. Who got to bless Zuckerberg with Facebook and make him a multi-bazillionaire?
Right.
He didn't invent it. Okay. The stuff going on over with Musk is part of a magician's trick. Even the way that they're getting all of the big money for their car production and everything else, it's part of the magician trick. Is there a mode for electric cars? Well, yeah, if you want to go ahead and go to the micro reactors and go to a nuclear grid or to a Tesla grid system and add a pulse to the ground plane, then it works. And I'm sure that that's somewhere in the not too distant future. But even from a green standpoint, what they're doing to pull all the lithium out and everything else on a mining side, I mean, you get me started there. I could go on for another couple hours about the infrastructure required to do what they propose to do on a mass scale. It's not green. It's not going to help the planet, and you can't do it at the volume that's required to allow for the mobility of people. It's painting ourselves into a canyon, into a corner. It's not the answer as far as I'm concerned. The cars are overpriced. They're not that good. And the technology is unimpressive to me. I do get, the great accelerating cars. I've got friends that have them. I love them, to ride in them. But then again, I'm only impressed by half. There's other things we can do that are better, and he didn't get there, except that there's some favoritism that goes to something similar to what happened with Zuckerberg.
Interesting.
Juan, I have a question about what you've referred to recently regarding the near-death experience that was going to unfortunately be necessary to awaken the comatose and the complacent. Can you elaborate on that regarding how much, as far as history repeating itself, like what happened October 16th through November 20th of 1962 between Kennedy and Khrushchev, that now it seems like history is repeating itself regarding the CCP and the US and Taiwan? What are your thoughts about that being the possible NDE?
Well, I think we're headed. I said there would be something akin to the Bay of Pigs. I believe that matches pretty well with what happened in Afghanistan with people in peril and not being able to get them extracted. I didn't say it would be exact, their allegory, but something similar in the feel. And then something similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis, where there's this face-off. They're going to continue, and they're going to build out, and they're going to threaten us, and they're not going to be stopped. And we're not going to let them reach that point where they actually have a tangible, real threat in place, ready to go. And behind the scenes, they actually did get there, and we also did stuff back. But for the world's perception, there's this face-off. And I believe that's the situation in Taiwan, and that's going to continue to escalate. We're far from done with that. And I don't think that has a long burn time. I don't think that's a year or two out. The Chinese know that Biden's toppy at this point in time, that something's about to go, unhinged there, and that there's going to be some power struggle. And they themselves don't believe that Harris is going to be president. They believe, the Chinese believe, that Pelosi is going to be president, that she's the one they have to deal with. She believes she's going to be.
Whoops, we lost Juan. Uh-oh.
Come back, Juan, come back.
Come back. I don't want Pelosi to be president. Please don't leave us there.
Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers and James Woods rocking the house.
Juan is here in Texas like I am. He'll come back.
Okay.
Well, I think that is fascinating because, as I had alluded to, I was looking up the actual dates of the Cuban Missile Crisis, as I mentioned a few moments ago, and it was October 16th to November 20th. So October 16th begins Saturday.
Yeah.
Hopefully nothing will escalate to that point of Rubicon, the point of no return. But it is also fascinating, and I certainly want to hear Juan's take on this, is the fact that the General Charles Flynn, the younger brother of General Michael Flynn, was actually put commander of the military in the Pacific 7 days after the so-called Biden inauguration. And that in and of itself says that the White Hats are in control to put him in, to put Charles Flynn in as commander of the military in the Pacific, because that would be a complete contradiction, and it would also show that that Biden obviously has either lost his mind or someone else is in control. And I think that's an interesting point that I'd like to hear Juan elaborate on.
Yeah. Yeah. We also spoke about the near-death experience and the issues with the banking system and some of the Bank of America freezes that have been going on. That's something that you've spoken with Charlie about on the show, right?
Right. Well, as far as most of these banks that are tentacles of the central banking system, that they are in the, well, actually, they are in jeopardy of certainly being brought down because of the quantum financial system, the quantum computer, because they wouldn't be able to conduct their nefarious activities of hiding money as they were under the binary system of computing, because the quantum system has the ability to track trillions of transactions simultaneously. And so that was one thing that we were discussing, is that the quantum computer is such a game changer, and that if anyone wants to see some of the plans the White Hats have for our country, all they have to do is go to quantum.gov, because again, quantum changes everything, including and especially the ability for anyone to hack into our computers because of the quantum superposition, where the 1 and the 0 are in multiple locations simultaneously. They're not stationary, the 1 and the 0, that is, and as they are in the binary system. So the quantum computer and everything quantum is a game changer of epic proportions, a paradigm shift that I don't think that we fully understand. But at quantum.gov, you can at least see some of the things that our government has in mind utilizing the quantum computer.
Yeah. And yeah, so did you contact him, Tom, to see if we can get him back?
I haven't done. I was just waiting for him to come back in. I mean, I can come off the call and call him.
Yeah, maybe do that real quick.
But he knows the link. I mean, I'll find out. One thing that you said there, Liz, when you said about quantum, so quantum comes to the same number as military, which is 107. So when we're always told it had to be the military that would intervene, it could well be the military, but it also could be quantum.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And
so
why not both? It could actually be both, because as we've heard,
well, of course, that's what I'm alluding to. It could be, you know, for one of them. But if we're going to go to a new age, then it definitely has to be quantum. You know.
right. And we've heard Juan actually say that they put in several different potential scenarios and game them out on the quantum computer. And then these incredibly brilliant people like himself, and also like Ezra Cohen Watnick, General Flynn, and the list goes on, that are the inner core of the White Hats, that we know that that's how they determine a lot of the specific moves they make in this 5D chess game. And of course, our president himself making the final decision as the commander in chief. So it is fascinating to see how technology is aiding and assisting with these strategies to bring down this deep darkness that's covered the earth. And it's going to take that. But moreover, as Juan has said, it's going to take a supernatural intervention of the hand of God himself, because we have come so close to going off the cliff, all of mankind. And truly, as he said earlier, as Juan said earlier, that God is not going to allow the complete destruction of the planet or of humanity. And so ultimately, that's where our faith and our trust is in God himself, who we were created in his image. And these are my opinions, but I think that's kind of what Juan's been saying.
Yeah, and Liz, you and I spoke on the phone the other night, and we talked about the fact that Trump and the Patriots and the White Hats have been doing a lot behind the scenes over the last 5 years. Not only did Trump compensate, or sorry, did we just lose Tom? Yikes.
It's just me and you. We're used to it though for hours and hours at a time, right?
I know, right? Well, not only did he confiscate over $100 million, oh no, you said 100 trillion in assets from Wall Street. You mentioned that they took down Amazon and there was an exchange. Some of that we saw on the SEC website, both for Amazon, Google, and Facebook, right?
Well, that is my understanding, is that the president himself, in order to help compensate the widows and the orphans that have lost trillions in pensions due to the nefarious activities of those on Wall Street, which we know the top Fortune 500 companies are primarily owned by the Illuminati, the deep state. And so it's my understanding that our president does have plans to, shall we say, compensate those that have been stolen from due to those nefarious activities from the Wall Street bankers and the like. Juan, were you able to hear anything that we were saying?
Welcome
No,
back.
I apologize. I actually wasn't paying attention. I didn't realize my phone was not charging, and I had so that wasn't. I wasn't under alien attack, and none of Pelosi's adherents were able to get to me. I just that was a loose net behind the wheel.
Well,
Oh, thank God. We were worried that you were leaving us with Pelosi.
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
let me go. Let me go. The nail marks in the floor as I was being drug out on the wood floor. You know, I can hear it now. Don't leave marks in the wood. Don't leave marks in the wood.
don't take her designer ice cream either, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. For people that aren't aware, she was doing some news thing. And so she's in her kitchen. She has 2 refrigerators that are like $30,000 a piece. And then they're filled with nothing but ice cream, every kind of ice cream you can find, because I like ice cream. And then she's talking about how she's an average American and she's just trying to, you know, be average like other Americans. Well, most average Americans don't have a $30,000 refrigerator, let alone 2 of them, and don't have them filled overflowing with ice cream.
Yeah. Let alone
it's
a
just,
net worth of $100 million.
Yeah. So, you know, she has some explaining to do.
Right. Absolutely. And also, Juan, you had mentioned before that, and I thought this was so significant, that if they wanted DC so much, you were going to, the government, well, the Trump administration was going to give it to them and slam the door shut on them. And also the possible moving of the nation's capital to a more central location that more accurately reflects the values of the nation. What are your thoughts regarding where the potential new White House or seat of government could be? Because obviously DC is so compromised underneath each of those buildings, and being the demonic portal it is and all the activities that have gone on under the buildings. Where do you see our nation's capital being moved to, or can you even say?
Well, I think that there was an intent to do some event that would make DC not able to function fully at some point had someone else won at a certain point in time, as opposed to Donald Trump. And that the plan was in place that be Denver. Denver's like a huge cauldron up there from these occultists' perspective. I love Denver, but I'm just telling you how they view it. Okay. I think at John Denver, I have friends up there that had record studios up in the hills. It's one of my favorite places in the world. But these guys have a different view. They try to corrupt and damage everything that they touch. And so from their perspective, you know, the Denver airport's built out far more extensively than people realize. And then there's some stuff there connecting it to locations in the perimeter of the bowl that, you know, the whole top of that runway area, which that thing was done by a pro contracting thing. There's some relation to, you know, pro ran and then lost, and this was part of the payoff along with something else, is the allegation. I have to qualify that. And the surface area there, the paved area on top of the airport, just as an aside, you could park every commercial and private jet on planet Earth at that facility. It's that big. It's amazing how big that is. That's why it's way out of town there. But from an occult standpoint, they always like to do their stuff on top of the hills. And so in the biblical narrative in the Old Testament, they did their ceremonies, their Baal and Moloch sacrificial ceremonies on the hills where the flames from their fires could be seen by everybody. And, it was ceremonial, the high ground. In military terms, the high ground is the easier ground to defend from. And so they want that high ground. And so Denver, being the highest city in the country up in this mountain location, and then central in the country, hardest to reach, protected by the land around it, not just protected by the ocean, but then the land for somebody to get to it, that it could make very good sense as a capital from a defensive standpoint. And I think that was clearly in the other people's plan. You see it in the artwork all through the airport, which in many places is quite bizarre. People with gas masks and things like that in the artwork. And it's just like, what in the world is this doing here? Then doors with, no identifiable numbers. Who comes and goes there? Well, you got to be the right person, the right connection, whatever. There's kind of, and all the airports have some of that, but it's a little more bizarre there. And then why would you leave DC? It is this federal city that is there, somebody else's plan to rule over us almost as a separate thing. And so the question is, does it make sense, as President Trump was doing, to begin to break up DC, move various agencies, offices to other parts of the country? The reality is we don't need a big central city like DC to do America's business. We don't need everybody to come to one place to do business. Having an agency in one place that does agriculture, and an agency in another place that does aviation, and an agency in another place, it spreads it out around the country. If an enemy was going to attack us, they have to hit more targets in order to take us out. And by kind of breaking things up, there's a certain reasonable stability, easier to protect by dispersing it around the country. Should there be a central seat location for Congress, the courts, the administration to work from, that probably still makes sense. But it probably doesn't have to have all the agencies that you have in DC all in the same place. Spread them out a little bit safer, and harder for the lobbyists to come in and maneuver. So, the big nuts, the Department of Energy, what's going to happen with that after Trump's back? Watch that. That's going to be a fun one. That's the big one. And so I don't know that I would even try to speculate on a city. There's so much logic to go into that and discussion, and I don't actually think it'll happen anytime soon. Certainly not in the near term, because there's a certain national prestige that is tied to Washington, D.C. that you're not going to break readily. You just have to tone it down radically, and it will die a natural death, fall back under the pond scum, and some later time, the people themselves will decide that they want a new central city on different themes, and they will reject the occult side of it. And it wouldn't surprise me a bit that there is some kind of a, natural, divinely orchestrated event or series of events that make that not make sense. And we have to find some place for some other reason, not because our enemies do it necessarily, but that could be it too. God used the Philistines. He used other countries, and it was said in the scriptures that God himself did some event to Israel or etc. as punishment, but he used other players. There could be some event that takes place that makes Washington not readily habitable for some period of time or safe. And of course, that's what we had with some of the poison stuff that was delivered in letters and things like that, with the ricin. If you had ricin loose all over the place, you couldn't guarantee it was safe to be around it. Well, you couldn't be in DC. So, these types of threats have been out there for a long time. And is it suddenly become perfected to the point where, okay, now it doesn't make sense? Maybe all of our Congress and administration meet virtually at some point in the future, have holographic meetings where it looks like they're right in the room, but they're safe because they're all dispersed around the whole country. Mm-hmm. And you can't take them out with one fell swoop like when they're in the congressional building. Hard to say, but I think there's those are not completely bizarre answers. Is it going to happen in the next couple of years? No. Is it going to happen in our lifetime? Say the next 10, 15, 20 years? I think it's quite plausible, yes.
Juan, I think it might be a good time to wrap up. We've had a good amount of time with you. Just wanted to, in closing, if you've got closing thoughts to leave a positive feel to all our audiences. One thing that President Trump said at the rally, right in the first couple of minutes, he was referring to something else, but he did slip the phrase and he said, a beautiful victory in November. And my ears pricked up when I heard that. But yeah. So if you just wanted to maybe close us out with give the battle cry and the cry of hope to everybody listening.
Well, President Trump enjoys to speak in code, and you have to interpret what he's saying. And it's not always clear by intent. Sometimes it's more clear than others. We're in a season where a lot is happening very quickly. Can we stay on the course we're on and keep an even keel for another year? Do you think that we can be in this state for a year? The fulcrum, the flip point, the flipping point, the reversal point. It's a fine line. It's a very thin edge. Think of like a triangular shape underneath a teeter-totter. And that's the point where it all pivots around. And there's a point right up to then where if you're riding the teeter-totter, it doesn't feel like it's going that fast. And all of a sudden you round that corner and it just, bang, it just seems to accelerate. With the lever, the fulcrum on the lever, you put it out close to where you want to move, and you have all that distance back behind it to move. Think of a 2x4 or something, and you're trying to move something. I had to bend a fender on a car here a short while back that got bumped when one of the kids drove it into a post, one of the employees. And I said, well, he was all stressed out. I was too a little bit, but I said, well, go ahead and grab a 2x4 and let's get a block. And we put it by a post, and then took this 2x4 and we bent that bumper out, which you couldn't have moved it by hand. You could have hammered on it forever. But with the 2x4, amazingly enough, we're able to move that bumper the inch or so that he bent it and got it straightened back out. Well, I had leverage on that little teeny spot to bend it out. The fulcrum of American history in this modern era, in this current situation, in this election stuff, is just moments ahead. And as we reach and get pressure on that fulcrum, be it on the clot thing, where we had an NBA player that just said, I was hurt by this and my career may be over, with clots in his back. We have thousands of employees, 10,000 at one company, 1,000 there, 1,000 workers in California in the police department, 1,000 in Chicago saying, I'm not getting this. That's a fulcrum that everything is bending around. If they're going to try to force something on the people that is absolutely at odds with the will of the people, and the people say no, they don't have to rise up, they just cross their arms, say no, dead, stop, I'm not doing it. The impact on the economy, the impact on the politics, no matter how hard they push, if the numbers are great enough, they're not going to be able to pull it off, and it's going to stop society in some incredible way. And then as momentum picks up in the understanding of the rest of the people who may have even gone ahead with this, that they somehow are at risk, the angel of death is hovering over their shoulder, that they may, in fact, for all that they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to see it, they didn't want to know it, that they are under some kind of medical tyranny that has put their well-being at risk, or their children's, people around them. The momentum that will pick up from that as more and more revelations come out is going to turn on those people who in the political, industrial, scientific realms have pushed this. And the pushback is going to be stunning. And you can have Biden strip a gear. You can have Harris come in and get challenged. You can have Pelosi be blessed and anointed. But the people at some point are going to be well past that tipping point, and the leverage from the mass of people to change the course, move things back, get it on course is going to be overwhelming. And you won't have enough people in government, in policing, anywhere else to stop the people from getting their way. And I believe that's what's just ahead. The fulcrum moment to prove that it can be done is a very, very short time away now. It's Red October.
Well,
Yeah.
especially when the Congress and their staff are not mandated to take the vaccine. I mean, that should say a lot to people.
Yeah.
There's a precise event, a very specific event that shows that they can be beat, that the tide has turned. There's a turning moment coming. It's very close now, in my opinion, and we'll see. But it's not very far off. When it happens, it shows that they can be beat, are in the process of being beat, and the they is those that are aligned together to force America to go in the cattle chute and self-terminate, and to go along with this global madness. This is a plan by globalists, and we're just an obstacle in their way. They want to depopulate the world. All of their plans, whether it be military, political, medical, everything that they're doing, the way the food supply is, everything is part of this plan to depopulate so they can repopulate with their crowd, their way. And we have to decide we're not going to self-terminate. We're not going along with the plan. We're going to have trials that'll be like Nuremberg in the not that distant future. And they won't be focused just on the medical. They'll also be focused on the graft, the corruption, the crimes against children, that people who don't want to hear this, that don't want to be, under the grip of this, it won't matter. you will have to hear this and be part of it and understand it. You can run screaming as the trains go by with all the people on them, but the world is going to show up in your neighborhood, and you're going to have to tour the camps and see what's been done in your name, what's been done under your noses against the world, against humanity. And that's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. And you know,
On
what I
that-
think is really, sorry, really quick. What I think is really fascinating, just to add to that one, is that, you know, this is such a different world war than we've ever experienced. I mean, it's literally the entire world is watching. The entire world of those who are awake are watching the elect or the elite few go down, right? And they named him Prince William because it was Will I Am. And when that gets flipped to I am will, I am free will, I am willpower, we are ready to take the power back. And I just encourage everyone who's watching this, anyone who's in the midst of striking or worrying about losing their job, just continue to fight. Don't let up, because we are taking our Taurus, our free will back. Go ahead, Liz.
That's what I was about to play off of what you just said, and what Juan was saying, that in terms of reaching Rubicon, the point of no return, as Juan was just saying, this fulcrum moment in time, it's a kairos moment in time, a divinely appointed time for this type of revolution to take place. We are at the fourth turning, a revolutionary state, but this Rubicon is about to be reached. And so, Juan, I think that it is so encouraging to hear you say that we're really, this fulcrum moment, we are very close to happening. Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah. You know, I was just going through earlier. In fact, people wonder. So if you look, we have these incredible books, all the books about these moments that happened in France with the French Revolution. And that time period in the French Revolution, Robespierre, he complained that would that there were just one head to lop off. But there were so many. They were putting people to the guillotine. They had rabble-roused the people into believing they could take out the monarchy and they could take out this person and that person. The same thing happened with the czars. They got the people conned into going along with taking out the czars and the royal family. And what did they get? They got, 70 years of incredible tyranny. The people that replaced it had a plan. They used the masses to go in, do a revolution or a civil war, essentially. They called it a revolution. It wasn't exactly a revolution. It was a civil war. And in that civil war, they came in and took over and subjected the people to something far worse than what they had begun with. That was the plan here with America, to put us into some kind of civil war, fighting against each other. It's been a common theme for a long time. Then they step into the chaos and take us over and take us even down an even worse path, destroying each other, crippling each other as a nation. In the French Revolution, there was a moment where sanity returned and people said, no, we're not going to kill each other off. We've got to stop this. Here in America, there's a moment here where we're just not going to go along with, they're aimed at chopping off our ability to communicate between each other, to damaging our ability to work together, stop the planting, stop the harvesting, just shut it all down somehow, but on somebody else's timeline to where it hurts us, the people. And at this point, we have to not fall into that calamity that has been planned for us, but regather our wits by divine revelation and assistance. We aren't going to get America back, except that we understand that we're being attacked by principalities and powers of darkness in high places, and we need divine assistance. There will be a calling out to God Almighty in heaven, and that will then be the assistance to win this battle with the bad guys, the black cats that are trying to con us into going along with their madness and destroying ourselves.
So true.
Well, thanks, Juan. Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you, girls. Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Miki.
We look forward to the next few days and few weeks.
We'll all be watching with bated breath, hanging on by our fingernails.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
all
much,
right.
Juan, as always.
All right,
it was
guys.
amazing.
God bless you.
All right. All
Good
right.
night.
Take
Good
care.
night.
Bye.